Representative Rubel, here we are for number 3.
I'm excited to be back.
I'm excited to have you back. You know, you are one of 2 people who have come in for a 3rd interview this legislative session. It's you and Representative Jordan Redmond.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny.
Whoever wants to say I'm right-leaning or left-leaning, it's like, well, I guess it depends on which interview you listen to. Anyway, listen, we're getting towards the end of the legislative session. We only have a couple weeks left. Somebody was telling me, they're like, listen, I think next week is kind of be the last, and then we're going to just clean things up in the fun. Do you think we'll be done in the next 2 weeks?
Well, the most fundamental thing we have to do is budgets, and we haven't done any of those, or barely any. So, in terms of the real meat of what we have to do, like, it's 95% not done yet, at least from the perspective of a person who sits on the floor.
Gotcha.
So there's a lot of work that has to be done in that regard. Now, maybe they'll crank and get it all through. I mean, most of the other bills are largely through the process, but the budget's a big deal. That's really the main thing, is to make sure the government still runs.
Well, God, here's keeping your fingers crossed. I can't go into mid-April.
I know.
It'd be too much. Okay, so look, let's talk about a couple things. First off, I had Senator Mike Crapo in here yesterday, and we were talking about a myriad of things, including public lands. And he was saying, look, and at one point, he was talking about management of public lands, and he said he would like to see Idaho managing its lands. They think, Idaho could manage them better. And I said, okay, look, are you saying that you'd like them to stay in the ownership of the federal government and then Idaho just manage them and maybe get reimbursed? Or are you saying you'd like to essentially repatriate those lands to the state of Idaho? Idaho owns them and manages them. And his reply was like, listen, I don't want to misquote him, but he essentially was saying, I don't have a problem seeing Idaho owning lands. And, we had a broader conversation about it. And again, you'll have to watch the episode, but the idea is, look, should we try to bring Idaho public lands into the ownership of Idaho? You ran a bill saying, hey, look, if we sell a portion of public lands, then we have a period of time where we can take that chunk of money, say it's $10,000. We can take that $10,000 and purchase a different portion of public lands. And the reason we may want to do this is, say we have like an island of public lands that's surrounded by private or something. It's hard to manage. We don't get up there, but there's this little pocket right next to existing public lands. And we already have Forest Service and grazing and everything. So we could sell the island in the middle of nowhere that's hard to manage and deal with, and then purchase this one as a substitute. You were running a bill that would attempt to give a window of time to do that effectively, and it died.
It's in the middle of dying.
It's in the death throes.
Yeah, I would urge people to not believe anything anybody tells them when they are assured that, oh, don't worry, if Idaho takes over the public lands, it'll be great. It'll still be public. It'll be so well managed. There won't be public lands if Idaho takes it over, for a lot of reasons. I mean, first of all, the management costs are enormous. And I think you and I talked in a previous episode, if we took over the federal lands, they wouldn't just be given to us. We would have to buy them. Like, federal law requires that you have to pay market price for them. So that would be $15 billion with a B just to buy them, or to even hold them. Then if we somehow got them, it would cost us another minimum $500 million a year on an ongoing basis to do fire suppression and road maintenance and all the stuff to actually keep them functioning. So it would absolutely bankrupt the state. We would sell them in a New York minute if we ever actually managed to buy them in the first place. But I have some pretty hard evidence right now as we sit here about the lack of commitment that Idaho and its leaders have to public lands, and why you should not let them anywhere near owning the federal public lands. So the state of Idaho, since it's become a state, has sold off about 1.1 million acres of public land. So we started out with about 3.5 million acres. We're now down to 2.4 million acres. Gone forever, not public anymore. They just sold it.
And that was the state of Idaho.
And that was the state of Idaho.
The federal government, we can't affect what they do with theirs.
Exactly.
Right? Okay, great.
The federal land's all still there. It's the state-owned public land that's gone.
And we've lost about 30% of that.
Yes, a little over 30%. So that tells you something just right out of the gate, that, roughly a third of it is just gone. They sold it, privatized. So if we took over the federal land, I actually think it would all be gone, probably, for the reasons I outlined. But the state of Idaho's record is not great on keeping public land public. But I had a bill right now. The law is that when the state sells public land, it has a little window of time to use the proceeds of that sale to buy different public land. but it can only do so for 5 years. If it doesn't buy new public land in 5 years, that money is gone forever, off to the stock market, can never be used to buy replacement public lands again.
And then it just kind of goes into the general fund wherever.
Well, it goes into the state endowment fund, which goes into stocks and bonds.
Understood.
But you can never replenish that public land ever again after the 5-year window is up. So I had a bill. We have about $85 million in there that is coming up on the end. It's coming up on the end of that window. And it takes years to broker a public land sale for the state to identify and buy it. So if we don't extend that window, like pronto now this session, we're going to lose much of that money, and eventually all of it. We're going to lose 30 million right away, and in short order we're going to lose the whole 85 million. So that will be another $85 million of public land gone forever. So I brought a bill with Representative Vanderwoude, a conservative Republican, saying let's extend that window to 10 years. Let's give them a few more years where they can shop around, see if they can find public land, so we can replenish all of the public land that was sold by the state. And the Farm Bureau came out and said, no, we oppose this. We believe in private ownership of land. We don't want to make it any easier for the state to replace its public land, so we want you to kill this bill. And most Republican senators are now saying, well, that's what the Farm Bureau wants. That's what I got to do. Don't want to get crosswise with the Farm Bureau. And so I have been advised and told that my bill is going to die this week. And I'm not even sure it'll be pulled up for a vote, which means $85 million of potential public land gone. So I think we can infer from this that the commitment to maintaining public land, certainly in our legislature, is very, very low. And what has happened with this bill confirms everything that I always feared, that if public land gets in the hands of our state, it will not stay public for long. It will be sold off, and no efforts will be made to replenish that public land. In fact, they will squash any legislative efforts to try to make it easier to replenish public land. So, but it's safe if it's in the federal hands. They can't sell it.
I know the guys at I don't know all the guys, but I know some of the people at the Farm Bureau. Who did somebody come out and testify to exactly what you're saying, which is we don't believe in public lands?
Well, they pointed me to their manual. They did. They came in and testified against it in the Senate. And they said that they, once the land is sold, they don't want the state being able to acquire public lands, even if the money they're using is proceeds of public lands. So you're not really increasing the amount of public lands per se. You're just replacing what you had before. But they were very vehemently opposed to it. And they pointed me to their manual that said they believe in maximizing the private ownership of property in Idaho.
Gotcha.
And that's where we're heading. And there are not enough Republicans who are willing to stand up to that. And we are going to end up losing a large amount of state-owned public lands as a result.
Gotcha. I'll have to have them in because, again, I've done many shows with the Farm Bureau, and I would like to understand this, like to what end, right? Because obviously they have to represent their members, and I know their members, at least the ones that I know, very much believe in multi-use, and they want to maximize not just grazing opportunities, but also, recreating opportunities as well. So again, I'll have to understand more deeply what they're looking at.
Well, and I think there's probably some variability amongst their members. In fact, my co-sponsor is a member of the Farm Bureau. Right. So he very much wants to see us be able to replenish public lands. But at least the leadership and the mouthpiece of the organization is not as enthusiastic about replenishing public lands. Gotcha.
Okay. So that's public lands. Let's talk about criminal justice reform, because there have been a lot of things coming around. I had Representative John Schertzen just last week. Great conversation with him. There are many things like the Bolter-Stahl bill that were shot down, and that would have made enhanced charges for somebody who kills a law enforcement officer. That got shot down. Some of the articulations were that, we're not making different classes of people in society. But then other things like the firing squad and then mandatory minimums, those are passing. So there's a lot going on with criminal justice.
Yes, and I wouldn't characterize any of it as reform. I would say we're pretty unidirectional this session in terms of just harsher, just moving toward ever more stringent penalties that are more and more mandatory, stripping away judicial discretion. And it's all, we got to show how tough we are in crime. We got to show how tough we are in this, how tough we are on that. And it's just been this relentless drumbeat where, now we're going to make the firing squad the mandatory method of, we just made child molestation a death penalty offense, and mandatory extreme sentences for drunk driving, and mandatory, one side, oh, now they turned solicitation of sex into a felony from, the first offense used to be a misdemeanor. Now they've made it a felony.
Well, can we go back to that real fast? Okay. That was Representative Raybold's bill, right? And that did in fact pass?
I believe so. Yeah.
Okay. So that one was looking at the propagation of human trafficking and using the market forces of sex work as something that was supporting human trafficking. She was like, listen, the majority of people that are doing this and engaging this are repeat offenders, right? So we need to we need to do something to dissuade people from doing that. And the burden of proof she felt was really, really tough already. So she's like, look, if we get somebody the first time, let's not give it a slap on the wrist. Let's move it right to felony, and we will have come on, the D word. It's not discern, not detract. It's
deterrence?
Deterrence. There she is.
So that's all they talk about is deterrence. We got to amp up every penalty imaginable and turn every misdemeanor into a felony. I mean, because before, solicitation of sex, first time was misdemeanor, and then second time and beyond was a felony. Now the first time is a felony. So again, if you're worried about repeat offenders, you could just make it a felony if you are a repeat offender. But that's not what we do now. We say you're a felon on the first time, which isn't necessarily going to be a sex trafficker. It could just be a lonely dude who just got dumped. I mean, not that it's a good thing. I'm saying it's a bad thing. I'm not pro solicitation of sex, but I am really questioning this road we're on of turning every misdemeanor into a felony, doubling, tripling the penalty for everything you can think of. We had a bill that required that you give up all your Fourth Amendment rights, even if you're a misdemeanant on certain offenses. So if you're going to be on probation or parole, you may not even have ever gone to jail. I mean, that's a situation where a judge has determined you're not that risky and they can turn you loose in society. Now you must forego all your Fourth Amendment rights and agree that your home, your personal belongings, your car, anything can be searched for no reason whatsoever at any hour of the day or night as a condition of being on probation. I really question whether that's even constitutional, but that's what they did. They just made it a criminal penalty to make a complaint against a farm. And if your complaint doesn't pan out, you're a criminal. I mean, it's over the top.
Okay, hang on a second. I feel like I'm only getting half of what you're saying. Here, let me do this.
Oh, sure.
There we go. There you are.
Yeah.
There you are. I can hear you so much better now. Oh. I was trying to figure out, I was like, are my headphones off? Okay, great.
Was I being too quiet? Nobody ever tells me that.
Listen to me. You're doing a great job. Okay, let's start picking these apart. So with the Fourth Amendment waiver, it's, again, speaking with Representative Schertz about this, he was saying, look, essentially what happens is, say at like 2 a.m., a law enforcement officer pulls somebody over who's on parole, right? And they suspect, they're like, look, there's something going on, but I don't have, he wasn't saying probable cause. It was some other articulation of like, I should have a valuable reason to search this person. It's like, what we can do right now in existence is get a hold of their parole officer at 2 a.m., get the parole officer on the phone, tell the parole officer where we are, have the parole officer come to us, and then we can search them with the parole officer present. So we already have this fourth waiver in the presence of a parole officer. But what he was saying is, look, that frequently pans out to be a prohibitive mechanism or prohibitive step in searching people. And he did bring up examples of, times when people were pulled over and there was suspicion of nefarious activity. They didn't have the parole officer. And then later on, again, they were able to find out that there was actually something bad going on.
So what we see in these scenarios is they paint a picture for you that sounds sort of reasonable. And they came in and I sat in that hearing and they said, oh, well, roadside stops are very risky for the police. And so they need to be able to do this because, there's nothing more dangerous for police than roadside stops. But the bill is not limited to roadside stops.
Sure.
They can come into your house at 3 o'clock in the morning. Then they say, oh, well, sometimes we're suspicious. They don't limit it to where there's anything suspicious. They don't limit it to any reasonable suspicion whatsoever. They drafted the bill so that, sure, it might encompass that 5% of scenarios that sound very reasonable, but it also encompasses another 95% of scenarios that I think we would find quite unreasonable. So somebody bursting into your house at 3 o'clock in the morning and rifling through all your belongings and going through your underwear drawer without a shred of reason to believe you did anything wrong is allowed under this bill. That's not the case they use in their marketing for this bill, but that is absolutely what they legalized in this bill. They made no effort to cabin it or contain it to the scenarios that might make sense.
And now, to be clear, it's not just somebody. We're talking about law enforcement officers, right?
Yep.
And in existence right now, if a parole officer is present, you can go into somebody's house at 3 a.m. If you have the parole officer and you're like, hey, parole officer, this is why I think we should go in. And the parole officer's like, okay, I'm here. Let's go ahead and do this. So we have in existence right now a mechanism to allow for that kind of entry. Obviously not kicking down the door without knocking. It's like, no, you got to,
But the scenario you just articulated, they had a reason. Right? They went to the parole officer and said, this is why we want to go in. And then they did. This bill is explicit in black and white. You can do it for no reason whatsoever. No reason at any hour of the day or night, go through anything you have. And that means anybody that lives in the house now is basically lost their Fourth Amendment rights. So even people who aren't on probation or parole, if you live with somebody who is, now you can have your house raided at any hour for no reason, and they can just rifle around, see what they found.
Okay, but that already exists right now. You just have to have the parole officers there. The
Well,
parole officer doesn't have to justify to anybody why they're going into a house.
Well, I think there's some cause, but it's more limited. I mean, now you're dramatically expanding the number of people, and I don't think they had that for probation. It was for parole. This expands it to probation, which is a huge expansion. No, this is not just a slight tweak on what we had before. This is a massive expansion.
Gotcha.
And it allows for fishing expeditions, if you will, which I think is exactly why we have the Fourth Amendment, is to not have fishing expeditions. Because any of us, if the police can just go through our homes and our cars and our phones and our computers at any time just to see what they find there, who knows what they might find on any of us. I think I have a pretty boring life, but who knows? Maybe I took a tag off a mattress or something, and if they went through
but you're also not a felon, right?
Like, well, this wasn't just for this.
No, I know,
this
I know.
Extends
But
to anybody on probation.
I understand what you're saying, but what I'm not for or against this. What I'm saying is that representing it as like this is like the police coming to any of us and going through our whole houses. That's not entirely true. They're not coming. This bill that just passed doesn't allow them to wander into your house at any time of the day or my house any time of the day.
It would if one of our kids were on probation, and then
okay. But right now in existence, and I'm going to make the gross assumption that none of your kids that live in your house are on probation.
They are not. Yes.
And I will tell you, I don't like to divulge personal details, but like neither are my kids.
Yeah.
Okay. So like that's not true. It's not true that they can go into anybody's house right now. What is true is that if you are on probation or live with somebody on probation or on very specific, because it's not any probation, right?
Most probations, actually. Yeah.
Most, but not all.
Well, right now they can't. This is a big new expansion. Right now it's limited to parole. But under the new bill,
it's not anybody on probation.
Just about anybody on probation. Yeah.
Okay. So felons and let's say most people on probation.
Yep.
Then the felons and most people on probation, if you are that person or if you are living with that person, then yes, the police can come. And now, mind you, like, do you feel that the police are going to spend a large portion of their time going after things that they think will be fruitless?
I think that we should have laws that protect us from that. I don't think police are unreasonable. I think generally they're good guys who are trying to do good stuff, but I don't think that we should be writing blank checks. Period. And just hoping that we have good people that aren't going to abuse the extraordinary powers that we're handing over.
Right.
I feel like we should be keeping our laws in line with the Constitution and the intent and spirit of the Constitution, and not just completely gutting the Bill of Rights and just hoping for the best that we'll have good cops who won't abuse it. But we have handed over a power that could be very readily abused here.
Understood.
And that is what our founding fathers wanted to protect us from, I think, is to protect us from fishing expeditions. People just being able to go, that's what happens in dictatorships, where the police can just come in and rifle through your house and see what they find.
Man, that's bad news bears. Yeah.
I don't like it.
Yeah. And especially the idea that it's like, hey, this is Bill. Bill's a great law enforcement. Bill would never do this. It's like, okay, but Bill's not going to work here forever. Like, even if we love Bill, at some point, Bill's going to go away.
Yeah.
And even if we get Bill's cousin, and Bill's cousin is like a great guy too, eventually there will likely be somebody who, is not the best, right? Like, this is why we have checks and balances.
Exactly.
So I get
exactly.
What you're saying.
And 99% of them might be amazing, but there is probably somebody in there who might abuse power if you gave them the opportunity.
Gotcha.
But again, I just don't think it's appropriate for our laws to be opening the door to that. So maybe it'll get challenged. I think it would probably go down if it were challenged in court. But we're doing a lot of this, just nonstop crank. And we already incarcerate more people than any state in the West. I think we're the leading incarcerator of women in the country. I think we have good judges. This is all premised on this false idea that we have soft judges who are just looking for excuses to not give proper sentences. And so we have to tie their hands and force them to lock everybody up forever. And I don't buy that premise. I think we have reasonable judges who hear the cases and listen and know all the facts, and we should leave them the flexibility to give sentences that they feel are appropriate for the individual involved.
With regard to the mandatory minimums for a second DUI where you kill someone, there was an instance that was articulated that I'm sure you heard, that was like, hey, here's somebody kills somebody in a second DUI instance. So it's not the first time, but it's the second time. And that person got like, I can't remember exactly what the wording was, but essentially they got like 1.5 years, and some of it was like you could be in like parole essentially. And you think that what are your feelings on that?
Yeah, I mean, that one actually doesn't bother me as much because it's on repeat offenses.
Yeah.
I get I'm much more concerned when somebody dies. I mean, that's pretty serious stuff.
Right.
I'm more concerned when we're putting in serious mandatory minimums on first-time offenders, particularly first-time people who might just be in possession of drugs. They're not even dealing. They just have an amount for personal use. And we're applying these, incredibly draconian mandatory minimums. I think it's really counterproductive. And I have heard from judges and from many people in the system on that, where, you take a person who's a first-time drug offender and you force them into prison for 5 years, you have taken a person who probably could have been rehabilitated, and now you've completely ruined their life and probably made them a lifelong criminal. And this is what judges say whose hands are tied in these. They're like, if it were up to me, I would send you to drug treatment and get your life back on track. Some of these are 18, 19-year-olds who otherwise could have a very bright future, but our laws completely tie the judge's hands and require long periods of incarceration. And by the time you spent 5 years in prison, you're a very different person and your prospects are far, far bleaker.
I have a family member in particular that really struggled as a younger person and did a dump truck of drugs at like 18, 19, 20. And this particular person is an unbelievably successful, competent, crushing individual, like multiple degrees, like very awesome, and just really struggled as a young person. So when you talk about somebody who's an 18, 19-year-old having a hard time or having a mandatory minimum for first time offense, I very much understand that.
Well, I'm very happy to hear your family member got their life back on track.
Oh, yeah.
Had they been locked up for 5 or 10 years, it's much less likely that they would be crushing it now.
Right. And there was no run-in with the law. Right. So there was no point when, this person went in front of a judge or anything. But I do know that I didn't know then, but now I know that this person was doing like all the drugs, like all of them. And, again, is better now. So, okay, let's keep going because I want to hit a couple more things. Constitutional Convention. You mentioned this. I, being the idiot I am, I do not understand what you're saying to me. So explain the Constitutional Convention.
Well, generally I've been very discouraged by this legislative session, but one of the bright spots was we defeated the attempt to get a Constitutional Convention. So this is one
of the Constitution. You don't just want to have a convention around the Constitution?
Yeah, no, we don't need to rewrite the Constitution. It's very good. I wish we stuck to it more than we do. As I said, I'm a big constitutional person, but there is it's not that obscure when you're in the legislature. You hear about it a lot, but your average citizen does not hear about it that much. There is a provision in Article 5 of the Constitution that talks about how you can amend the Constitution, and it provides 2 alternatives. The first one, which is the only one we have ever used in the 27 times our Constitution has been amended, which is where each House of Congress proposes an amendment. It's a very discreet amendment. You see it in black and white. It's like women can vote, or we won't have slavery, or it's something that you can see what you're getting yourself into. And then each chamber of Congress passes that, and then it goes in front of 75% of the states, and if they ratify it, then it's a law. There's this other way that has never been tried, but it's in the Constitution, and it calls for when 2/3 of the states sign a resolution saying we want a new constitutional convention, we get a new constitutional convention. And it's like 1787 all over again. And nobody really knows what this would look like because it's never happened. It's like half a sentence in the Constitution. Now, what I think this is, and people will say, well, it's in the Constitution, so obviously our founding fathers wanted us to use this.
Right.
And the way I see it is it's like, no, they created these two mechanisms because they didn't know how the heck this thing was going to work out.
Right.
They didn't know if the country was going to be successful or not. They thought they had some good ideas, but it's entirely possible after 20 years, the whole experiment would have failed and they needed to go back to the drawing board. That's kind of what this option is. They're like, well, if our plan completely fails, here's the break the emergency glass and go just write a new constitution. But I don't think we're at that point where we want to trash the constitution we have and write a new one. But some people say, oh, the national debt is so big, we need to do something really dramatic and just take a hatchet to the constitution. I think it's the most risky thing ever. And I did not want to see Idaho adding to get to the 34 states it takes for this to happen. And this was a great coalition we had last Wednesday. The far right, the Democrats, and a number of moderates teamed up, and we beat the Constitutional Convention, or CONCON.
The far right and the Democrats teamed up.
Yep.
This is wild.
Well, we all love maybe people have different parts of the Constitution. I mean, I'm a huge First Amendment fan. Well, I love them all. But I think they were more committed to the Second Amendment, but everybody has their part of the Constitution that they would not want to see gutted. And so for the far right, they think, well, gosh, what if they took away the Second Amendment? And, and so they teamed up with us. And I'm really happy we beat that back. I know we'll probably see it again at some point. There's a constituency of people who just really, really want this to happen, and they bring it back every few years. But at least for now, our Constitution is safe.
And if this happened, when you say 2/3 of the states get the Constitutional Convention, what happens at that point? What is the mechanism of the Constitutional Convention?
That is the great unknown. And people have written so many you ask 100 constitutional scholars, you might get 100 different answers on what exactly will happen.
Right.
And one thing people seem to think, you cannot contain it to a particular subject. So you couldn't say, for example, oh, we're only going to talk about a balanced budget amendment. Like once you call the convention, everything is on the table and they can do anything they want in there. Nobody really knows for sure how you would select the delegates. I mean, except that it would probably be up to Congress. Congress would set the mechanism and figure out how people would be selected and how many representatives each state would get. But it really is a plunge into the great unknown. And as I said in my floor debate, the only certainty is that there is uncertainty, which I feel is not a good attitude to have with our Constitution. I feel like we should not be playing Russian roulette with our Constitution and hoping that good things happen when it's, goodness knows what I mean. They might just end the whole Bill of Rights. We don't know what the heck would happen in there. And I'm not willing to take the chance. And thankfully, we had enough other Republicans who were also not willing to take the chance that we defeated it.
Well, look at that win. Look at that win.
Yeah. I mean, there might be some amendments that might someday make sense. But I feel like if we're going to amend the Constitution, we should use the tried and true method where we actually know what we're voting for. And we see in there, an equal rights amendment. Okay, I want that or I don't want that. And not just this open-ended rewrite approach.
Well, awesome. Okay. One last thing. You guys also had a big win with breast cancer screening.
Yes.
Talk to me about this.
I am so excited about this. So I worked on this bill with my seatmate, Representative Brooke Green, who is going through breast cancer right now. She was diagnosed last fall. To back up, for most women, your average mammogram will work. Most women after a certain age go get their mammogram every year, and it will find breast cancer for most people, but not for everybody. If you have certain kinds of breast cancer or certain risk factors of the BRCA1 or 2 gene, then a regular mammogram won't find it. And the doctors described it as like trying to find a cloud in the fog, that it's just the normal mammogram technology is insufficient to find it. So for that category of women, they need a special, more expensive kind of screening to actually identify whether they have breast cancer. And it might require an MRI or an ultrasound or, contrast image mammograms, et cetera. And right now, insurance doesn't cover that, or at least it doesn't cover it at the, preventive level where it's completely covered. And so this is really terrible because for these affected women, they are at great risk of it not being found until they're at stage 4. And at that point, obviously, your prognosis is terrible. And frankly, it's a lot more costly. And at that point, you're looking at mammogram and chemo and radiation and all this stuff.
For sure.
Whereas if you could identify it in stage 1, just everybody's happier. You're more likely to survive. You're more likely to just be able to deal with it with a lumpectomy or something that is a more minor procedure. So our bill calls for insurance companies to cover this enhanced screening for the women who fall in the high risk categories. It's not all women, but like 10% of women will now qualify to get this enhanced. So I'm really excited about it. I got a little choked up in my floor debate because I remember my son, when he was 11, one of his best friend's mom died of breast cancer. And it was so awful. And I just remember being at that funeral with just his whole gang of little 11-year-old kids and that poor kid who just lost his mom. It was like, oh, it was terrible. And all the kids were just like trying to wrap their head around this. And if we can stop that from happening, so worth it.
God, amen to that. This session has been really, I've never followed politics. I've never covered a session. Are they normally like this?
Well, as a Democrat, it's never really a happy experience. I mean, when you have 17% of the seats, you're going to get your butt kicked a lot. This one felt a little bit more apocalyptic than most, in that I feel like big long-term damage was done that we are going to be spending the next 20 years trying to recover from just enormous revenue cuts that we will never be able to afford. You know, and I mentioned in a previous episode that, you know, the governor recommended $100 million in tax cuts, and the legislature did $450 million of tax, like permanent revenue reduction, never going to see that money again. And the numbers are not adding up. And I think for a very long time, we are really going to be struggling to do basic things and to keep our public school teachers paid and to keep the roads paved and the bridges standing up. I got a bridge falling down in my district, and there's going to be a lot more of those and no money to fix it. And I know you talked to Representative Achilles, but we don't even have money to do the things that people traditionally counted on state government to do anymore. And then you layer in vouchers, and they're already saying that that's going to go from 50 million to 250 million within the next year or two. So we're going to have really long-term disastrous fiscal pressures. And then you layer in what's happening at the federal level, where the feds are stripping away all of the services that we need in terms of having hydrologists and landslide management and flood control and fire control.
Or VA staff.
And, you know, all of these very vital services that keep us safe and functioning. All of that's getting hatcheted at the federal level. And we have negative dollars, absolutely not one penny to try to backfill that at the state level. So, you know, we can't replace any of the services that are getting cut by the feds. And as I said, we're not even going to have money to do the services that the state traditionally supplied. So I think we have set ourselves up for a disastrous long-term fiscal crunch with just getting way over our skis in these revenue loss commitments, if you will, whether it be through vouchers or through these ginormous income tax cuts. We cut past the bone, and we tried to warn them, but they wouldn't listen. And I think even the governor knows that this was a really bad idea, but he didn't want to get himself in political trouble by standing up against it. But I don't know what it's going to look like. We're going to get hit hard next year, the year after that. And, you know, it's politically impossible to ever raise taxes. So you got to just hold on to the revenue that you have. But we didn't do that.
Well, Representative Rubel, I can always count on you to cheer me up.
We should do something. Breast cancer screening. Yay.
Your district is close by here, right?
Yeah. So my district, I am BSU on east. So I have everything from BSU and then kind of southeast Boise out to Micron, Lakewood, Timberline, all that stuff.
Well, listen, my proposal to you is, first, you have been so giving of your time during the session. I'm really, really grateful. But I would also like to do something with you after the session that's not focused on, you know, mandatory minimums necessarily.
And I'm going to bring a list of happy topics.
Or there's the Idaho Beef Council is actually doing a burger battle in the month of May. And the Boise Metro Chamber of Commerce is in on it, the Eagle Chamber of Commerce. So if you have like your favorite burger spot, I would be totally down to go and like showcase your favorite burger place. We could get a burger, do an episode while we're eating the burger,
I love that.
showcase your favorite people to support the people in your district and do something fun like that.
I love burgers. I love that. And it'll be such a happy conversation. We'll be talking about how great burgers are. It'll really cheer people up.
I want a milkshake too. Yes. Like I want a malt, like old school style. Representative Redmond actually was like, dude, Hudson's up in Coeur d'Alene, that's the spot. So I actually just got a hold of Bobby Joe at the Boise Chamber and said, hey, do you know the chamber person up in Coeur d'Alene? Because I'll go up there. I'll take like the equipment. We'll go up there and we'll showcase a bunch of burger places up there. It'll be awesome. It'll be a good time.
I'm with you. I live for chocolate malts and they're hard to find.
Okay, well, do you know any in your district?
Yes, I do.
we're going to do
one.
this.
Yeah, I
We're
like
gonna
it.
do this. God bless it. Representative Rubel, thank you for coming in. Thank you for what you do in this session, and thanks for what you do for Idaho.
Oh, thank you for shedding a light on what people's government is up to.
I do my best. I'll talk to you soon.